This is the Rana Plaza in Dhaka in Bangladesh. In 2013, it collapsed, killing 1,133 workers and wounding 2,500 others. The day before the collapse, cracks were noticed in the structure of the building and evacuation was recommended. Bank and shops on the lower floor took the recommendation and evacuated. The people who run the garment factories told the workers they had to report for work on pain of dismissal. In the morning, they turned on the illegally installed generators and the building collapsed, killing all those people and wounding all those others. This is one of the uncomfortable truths about global capitalism. Its health depends on the exploitation of the people who work in places like this in the global south. About 83% of the global manufacturing labour force is now located in the south, working for a pittance in places like this. So some of us here can afford nice things. Now let's have a look at what happens to these shirts made in Bangladesh and ask who benefits. Typical shirt, say H&M sell it in Germany for $4.95. They'll pay the Bangladeshi manufacturer $1.35 for each shirt. It costs about 40 cents for the cotton to make the shirts. Forget the 6 cents shipping for the time being. And so Bangladesh ends up with 95 cents to share amongst everybody who contributed towards making that shirt. The Bangladesh economy is expanded by 95 cents. Germany's economy is expanded by 3.54. 4.95 for the shirt minus the 1.35 that the Bangladeshis get and the 6 cents paid to the shipper. After various costs, H&M will make about 60 cents profit per shirt. The German state will capture 79 cents of that sale through VAT of 19%. So here, the German state, the German economy in general, and H&M all make a hell of a lot more out of this than the people in Bangladesh who actually produced the shirt. That's the way global capitalism works. Looking further at who benefits, Tony Norfield in the China Price explains that a large chunk of this revenue from this t-shirt will go to the state in taxes and to a wide range of workers, executives, businesses in Germany. And of course, consumers get cheap t-shirts and a wide range of other imported goods which are affordable for them. So this is an important source of income for the state and also benefits all the people in the richer countries. In 2013, and this amazed me, look at the second bullet point here, the year of that social mass murderer in Rana. The tariff charged by the US government on apparel imports from Bangladesh exceeded the total wages received by the workers who made those goods in Bangladesh. So the American state benefits from the labour of those people in Bangladesh far more than they do. Now, as Tony Norfield explains here, low wages in Bangladesh help explain why the richer countries we can have shop assistants, advertising executives, so I'm never really sure what value they add, and a wide range of welfare payments and much else besides. The oppression of workers in poorer countries is a direct economic benefit for the mass of people in the richer countries. Look at the fourth bullet point. Ruthless, and that's really a little bit too kind a term for them, global buyers are going to are targeted with reducing costs. They've been so good at that, wages are now below subsistence levels in many countries. So to go ahead and improve their competitive position, domestic suppliers are going to cut overheads, forget all about safety, make working conditions even worse. They know that if they don't do this, the big global corporates who sit at the top of these supply chains can move their business easily to another impoverished part of the world. And we have to remember too, the fifth bullet point here, tariffs will serve to further increase pressure on these margins. So these tariffs that benefit America, Germany, other countries in the global north actually serve to shaft these people in the global south even more. Untitled Report 2013, last bullet point here. In labour-intensive sectors, where global buyers can exercise bargaining power to reduce costs. This pressure results in lower wages, and the drive for reduced costs often results in what they say here, significant occupational safety and health violations. And that can end up in death, as indeed it did in Rana in 2013. So that's all part of the price of your cheap shirt. So let's look at what globalization in general actually means. Globalization is not about increased competition from the global south for the big global transnational corporations or TNCs. It's more about those TNCs extracting surplus value from developing nations' labour forces. Look at the figures here. Bullet point number one. Around 80% of global trade is related to transnational corporations' international production networks. 3/4 of that consists of intermediate goods and services incorporated at various stages in the production process of goods and services for final consumption. So basically, the assembly line has been contracted out. Those bits which are labour intensive are performed by very poorly paid people in the developing world. That's why we can afford cheap shirts and cheap phones, etc. Stephen Roach, Morgan Stanley in 2004, so obviously no lefty, but he puts it very nicely here. Substitution of high wage workers here, i.e. the global north, with light quality low wage workers abroad. In an era of excess supply or overproduction, as we would say, have a look at Das Kapital for some stuff on that. Companies lack pricing leverage as never before and must be unrelenting in their search for new efficiencies. Offshore outsourcing that extracts products from low-wage workers in a developing world has become an increasingly urgent survival tactic for companies in the developed economies. So this is a response to basically pressure on the profitability of the big companies in the global north. They can extract surplus value from poorly paid people in the developing world. Look at China. Now, China's a success story in many ways, but you have to remember its exports are dominated by foreign transnational corporations. By 2003, these foreign TNCs, 80% of China's exports of industrial machinery were accounted for by the foreign TNCs. 90% of computers, components and peripherals, 71% of electronics and telecommunications equipment. That tendency obviously has intensified further in recent years. Now, last bullet point, no big surprise, it's the foreign TNCs that reap the super profits from exploiting Chinese workers. Foxconn, or Honhai, they do well. They made 2.4 billion in profits in 2010, or 2,400 per employee. Apple in the same year made something like $263,000 in profits for each of its 63,000 employees. So certainly China gets some benefit from this, but the real benefit, the real money goes to the people sitting at the top of the supply chain, Apple in this case. So do not see globalization as anything other than a way of transnational corporations making more dosh out of people, except this time they're exploiting people in the developing world. So low-wage exploitation, it represents more than a moral issue for us in the global north, though hell, the moral issues are bad enough. It's also an issue regarding how it affects the inclination of our big companies to invest for the future. UNCTAD 2013, first bullet point here. The tendency of companies to seek profit gains from exploiting wage differentials rather than through innovation and investment has produced limited dynamic benefit for the rest of society. In other words, the presumed transmission of higher profits to the higher grossed fixed capital formation has not materialized. 2015, a head of Blackstone Asset Managers wrote to the top 500 corporate bosses, said they were underinvesting in innovation, skilled workforces, and they were not putting in place the essential capital expenditure necessary to sustain long-term growth. He may have been moved to do so by the figures in 2014. The third bullet point here, the top 500 US companies returned the equivalent of 95% of their profits to shareholders in dividends and share buybacks. Remember, the people that run the companies are often those shareholders as well, and it's in their interest to get themselves paid as much as possible because they tend to do the job for about 2-3 years and move on somewhere else. So why invest for the future when you can go ahead and pocket all the surplus value in this form? Next bullet point, tangible investment in plant and machinery by US private industry. declined from 14% of output in 1980 to around 7% in 2011. It's fluctuated around that figure since, but as the next bullet point here shows, Harvard Business Review 2018, they said that investment was low given the extraordinarily low cost of equity and debt and the amount of cash that corporates had hanging about in their balance sheet. Now, measured against GDP, corporate after-tax profits were almost double what they were 25 years prior and higher than any time since World War II, reflecting the fact that profit is taking an increasing share of GDP. But business investment had only risen 13% over the same period. Now, the next bullet point, I think, explains this quite simply. The shift in production to low-wage countries has been enthusiastically pursued as an alternative to investment in new plant and machinery. It's also a serious barrier to new entrants in the market and restricts competition. So again, why bother to invest? You're making plenty of money at the moment and you're paying yourself and your shareholders all that surplus value. Why would you bother investing for the future? This affects all of us, guys. Now, financialization is obviously something which has been given a massive impetus over the last few decades by what's happening with the extraction of global surplus value. Milberg is a bourgeois economist, but he's a guy who understands what's happening. He writes here, the impetus to the process of financialization is a result of the rapid expansion of manufacturing productive capacity in low-wage countries, supporting capital flows from those low-wage countries to the industrialized nation. All this supports asset values in the latter, and basically it makes risky investment in stuff that may pay dividends in years to come a bit less attractive. Again, why invest for the future when you can go ahead and invest it in some financial instruments that will give you a short-term benefit? This is one of the reasons why we're facing long-term stagnation. So that's the real cost of your cheap t-shirt. If you want to make things better, well, we have to transform our economic system and change the consumerist ethic which drives it. That's a pretty long run project. In the meantime, you can buy your t-shirts from ethical suppliers like these guys here.